what do they call you?
They call me Sneaks.
What are you incarcerated for, and how long is your sentence?
I'm incarcerated for first-degree murder, and my sentence is 50 years to life.
Where are you from out here on the streets?
I'm from the San Gabriel Valley in Los Angeles County, in the city of La Puente, but the gang I pertained to was Townsman.
You know, I want to go ahead and thank you, man, very much for taking the time out of your day and sharing your story on this show, exclusively on Stories Written by a Current Prisoner, my friend. It's a beautiful Sunday, and just know I appreciate your presence, sir.
You're welcome.
All right, my friend, before we dive into your personal life story, man, I've always kind of been interested in how these gangs started and how they began and how they basically took over territories in specific cities. You know, the city of La Puente, we've known that's always been a gang-infested area. It's been known to go at it with other gangs, and also it's also known to go at it within gangs within La Puente, man. Would you be able to tell me a little history about the Townsmen, of how it started?
Yeah, well, the brief understanding that I got from my older homeboys, especially the ones that started it, was in the 70s. The community within the city of La Puente, where we're at, which is on the east side, that community, the tract homes community, when it was built, I believe in the 50s, it was called the Happy Homes community. And so when those tract homes were taken up and people moved in, I guess the gang back then was called, the original gang that was where my gang was now was a different gang. And at that time it was called the Happy Homes gang. And they were around from that time all the way up to maybe to the 80s, but around the 70s they kind of started dying out. And the younger brothers some of them had younger brothers, and some of the other guys that weren't didn't have gang-related family members started another gang because they lost, I guess, faith in the gang before them from that area, which was Happy Homes, and then they started hanging out at first, and then they started the gang called Townsmen because they just wanted to start something new. They didn't want to be part of Happy Homes or the other gang at that time that was around, what was called Puente 13. And so they started Townsmen. And around the same time, there was another gang on the further east from us called Eastside Dukes. They started. And and then so they started, and immediately in the beginning, the only enemies they had were the only people they got along with were guys from Puente. And they went at it with the remaining guys who Happy Homes Grande, which by that time, like I said, there were not many left. They were dying out. And another gang called Linda Flats, which is on the other side of the city. So they started going at it with Happy Homes, Linda, and Eastside Dukes. I think at that time
you had 60 seconds remaining.
They only went at it with Puente. Let me call you right back. As my hood started around that time, we ended up going at it with the guys from Happy Homes, Belinda, Eastside Dukes, and even another gang that was kind of far away, but we still didn't get along with them. Was called Bassett. You just automatically, I guess, we beefed it with all of them. The only ones that we weren't beefing it with was with the guys from Puente at the time, because some of my homeboys that started the hood that lived on the borderline of West and Puente had family members from Puente. So a few years in, I guess, these guys were approached by the guys from Puente, and they were telling, hey, well, talk to your other homies and see if you guys want to become part of Puente. And since these guys from my neighborhood, from Townsmen, had, their dads, their uncles, or brothers were from Puente, they were like, all right. They thought it was a good idea. So they had a meeting, and the guys that the guys on this side that started it were happy ones were like, nah, that's not what we're gonna do, because if that was the case, we would have got into happy homes, or you guys should have just got into Puente. We did. We started Townsend because we wanted to be on our own. And so they went to that meeting and they told them that, and it didn't go too well. Soon after that, we ended up going at it with them, with everybody, including them. And it remained that way.
This call and your telephone number will be monitored and recorded.
And now about maybe if you fast forward to like the 90s, another gang started, which was a small one, kind of not around that much more, but it became our enemy also because it ended up starting between us, in our territory between us and Puente, and that gang was called Little Hill. And that became my generation's worst enemy, and that's who I'm in here for right now. And it's been that way. It's to this day. That's the scenario. What's going on right now in that area.
You said that it's your guys' barrios worst enemies, at least within your generation. May I ask why that is, sir?
Well, it's because the guys that started that gang, they had before that started that gang called Little Hill, it was just a little crew called it was like a party crew called the Rowdies, and a lot of them were my age or a little bit older, maybe a year or two older than me, and they were given a decision, an ultimatum by my older homeboys, because it came to a point where it was either you guys better stop this party crew shit, you guys gonna either become a gang or stop claiming that. And because they had started writing on the walls and so it kind of my older homies thought that little party crew was getting out of hand, so they served them an ultimatum. Either you guys just make a decision if you guys want to really see about the life. You guys can either just claim Townsend or stop claiming that route, stop writing on the walls. And a lot of these guys were, like I said, my generation. So, and my friends, some of these guys, I went to school with them all my life since elementary, and my pappy said already to be from Townsend, because like I told you, my two older brothers before me were from Townsend. So obviously I was going to follow in that step. So it was a no-brainer for me, because, I already knew what my mind was set on. So those guys from the Rowdy, they decided, some of them joined us, and the one that didn't went on to start that gang called Little Hill, which to us, since we grew up with those guys, we looked at it like a betrayal. Like, what you guys doing, You guys should have just, in my mind, or in a lot of our minds, you guys should have just went on your way and stopped, just not been a gang, just been regular, just regular life. Or joined us if you wanted a gangbang. But when they started their own gang, that basically drew the line right there, like saying, it's like the saying goes, if you're not with us, you're against us. And so that's how we looked at them. And immediately, this was like in the early 90s, and then that was a bad time for gangs. There was a lot of gang activity on that time. And we just went at it with them real tough. And that's why it became our generation's enemy, because they're our age group,
Before the incident with your murder that you were involved in, do you remember losing friends, losing loved ones, close homeboys, and how it affected their families? Their mothers crying, their sisters being heartbroken. Are there certain incidents like that stick out in your mind, certain homies?
Oh man, a lot on both sides, for them and us. They went back and forth, on a daily basis. I've had multiple friends, close friends I grew up with since elementary that were killed, and same thing for them. So the hurt went both ways. Our families felt it on both sides, but the pain had no say on whether it would continue or slow down or stop. If anything, it was gas on fire. It for every death, it was like the hate grew bigger and worse, you know, and the retaliation was even, it just escalated on every front. It just escalated, you know. Instead of making you think and want to slow down and be like, oh, wait, maybe this life ain't for me, or this is wrong, look at the pain we're causing. No, it fed the negativity was fed even worse, you know, and it escalated and got real bad, you know. And then at that time, you got to remember, this was the late 80s, early 90s, and the crack epidemic was real bad, you know, bad. I mean, this shit is bad, but it wasn't as bad as the crack. I mean, I don't know who killed these individuals or were involved or were responsible. Well,
this call and your telephone number will be monitored and recorded.
Most of them I do know who are responsible, I would think, but I won't get into the specifics of the people or names. But like, I had a homeboy called Blackie that I was real close with, and he was from my gang. I grew up with him since elementary, and we were just partying one night, and it was during that era, the early 90s, where the gangbanging was at its all-time high. And we were at a place on a cul-de-sac street in our territory. It was about good, maybe 20 of us just partying right there, drinking, doing drugs, whatever. And he decided to want to go back to to go visit his old lady before he went home that night, I guess, you know, to get some, I guess, that night. And we told him, hey, Don, you know, it's not a good time for you to be walking right now. You know, we'll give you a ride, you know. Just give us a few minutes, you know, whatnot. And he's like, nah, I don't want to ride. Don't trip. I'll be back. And a few of the homeboys stopped him from doing it. We just told him, hold up, man. We're all decided to leave. We'll drop you off. And so he played the part, for a second. And then when they're off guard and people weren't paying attention, he took off walking. And before we knew it, we didn't even notice. We heard probably about, I don't know, maybe about 20, 30 shots go off close by, maybe like 3 streets away. And we knew right away, like, it couldn't be us responsible for doing the shooting. So we all looked around and we kind of caught the wind. Like, the only one that was missing right there was him. And we realized, he must have left. And that might be him, what we heard. So we drove up that little area where he would be walking to his old lady's house, and one of the neighbors' house where it happened at, we're outside with the porch light on, and they were like, hey, your friend's right here, you know, I guess. And he was just laid out right there, shot up dead. He was already dead. And they shot him, I think, about 15, 17 times and I could, it was by the sound of the gunshots, I knew it was like a assault rifle, like AK or AR-15. And when we got to the scene, it was real horrible. You know, it was the first time I had ever seen brains, literally brains just hanging like that. When I seen it, I was just like, oh my God, you know, like, because that was my homeboy too, you know, and I was just like shocked that it was him and shocked of how bad it was. I expected to see him alive, like, oh, need a ride to the hospital or whatnot, you know, like, because I had seen people get shot before, you know, but never like that, like him just laying there with his brains, you know, hanging out his head, you know, and it was a wrap, you know. He was dead. It was not like call the cops or ambulance or whatnot to try to help him stay alive. No, he was dead. It was, you know, it was a wrap. So a lot of us were on parole, warrants. Some of us were strapped, armed. So we knew we had to leave before the cops came, because it was a matter of minutes that someone already had called the cops. So the ones that could stay behind stood, and us that couldn't, we left. But for a long time, you know, I couldn't, you know, stop dreaming about just seeing his brains like that. I would dream about that, you know. And that was one of the things that, kind of haunted me for a while. But, you shake it off, because by then I already had seen other people get shot in the stomach, and here or there, the body somewhere, And, at this time, I was...
You have 60 seconds remaining.
Probably about 16 or 17 years old when this happened, I had already seen a lot, but that one was one of the worst ones at that time in my life, so it stuck to me in my head for a while after that. But yeah, that was just one of the scenarios, and of course his mom lived up the street, and she came down. By then I was gone though, but I knew that, I already had seen this before. She came down, and, of course she was devastated, and his whole family was there, and, a week or two later to do the funeral arrangements, and, and all that other stuff. But I experienced that, like I told you, I was having some, bad. I was real young at that time, and it was like crazy. One of the, at that time in my life, one of the crazy scene, and one of the first people that I knew that in my life could be murdered like that. And unfortunately, it wouldn't be the last, but I just seen his family and all that. But, like I was saying, it just makes it worse. It just makes people more pumped up to go do the worst things back. And, you get deeper and deeper into that lifestyle. And, you find, before you know, you find yourself knee deep into things, and doing things that you never thought you would do. And getting used to them at that. But, growing up like that in a gang environment, the only alternative I ever thought for me to do with myself would probably have been like maybe go to the military. I like because I had a cousin that went to the military, and I kind of liked that. Had I chose a different life, I think I would have went to the Army or to the Armed Services or something like that, because I did like that type of stuff. But I didn't. I chose, the wrong direction. And as soon as I turned 18, 19, I caught my first felony for selling crack. They caught me with about an ounce of crack back then, because I was the thing to sell. And I did my first prison bid, and that was around, the end of 1994, the beginning of 1995. And I did my first little prison bid, and got out. I think I did 3 or 4 years for that term, and then soon after that, a couple parole violations in and out. Around that time, one of those times I was out, I ended up, I had already a girlfriend I had been with since high school time of my life, and so when I found myself out on one of those times, she got pregnant, and we had twin sons. They're about, but I got out. That didn't slow me down, unfortunately, and that ruined that relationship. Continued to go, and finally I got tired of it. And my family Puente, while I was busted, and one of the times I was in a prison, when my prison burned in, out there to the Riverside County, about an hour out from Puente, away from all that bullshit. So when I got out, I decided, you know what? I got my kids, I need to start straining out my shit. So I stood out for about 5 years. I went to trade school to become an electrician. I was working in that and everything. Got out of parole. For about 5 years. And just one day, coming back to visit my kids lived in Puente, inside the city, and I was visiting them one weekend, and on the way back, one of my older brothers from my neighborhood, from my gang, was out, and he was in the neighborhood up to no good, renting a house over there, slinging dope, whatever. And I hadn't been back there to the hood in some years, though I kept in touch with some of my close homeboys I grew up with, but I didn't really go back into the neighborhood, for gang reasons at all for a long time. But so I stopped to visit my brother after he asked me to stop, and I did. And this is the night I ended up getting convicted for what I'm busted for right now, for this murder. So I stopped to visit my brother. We're talking, and he had a transaction he had to do because he had some of the little homies from our neighborhood selling for him, and they were to come re-up, and he didn't have nothing, so he asked me if I could stay there at that house while he went and picked up his merchandise and came back, and to entertain them if they came. So they did. He was gone, and they came over because they were at a party around the block, and the girl that was throwing the party for her little brother, I knew her because she was my homegirl, and we used to kick back at her house all the time. Her house is a known hangout for our gang. So when with her, looking for to re-up for my brother, my brother wasn't back yet, so we're waiting, and finally he told me he'd be back about 30 minutes to an hour, and they were like, back to the party and wait for your brother. They invited me. I said, all right. So I went. It was just right around the block. And we got there. As I entered the house, this was her little brother's birthday party, and he don't gangbang, so it was his friends that were there. You were young. And probably early 20s age group. Teenage, 19, 20 era kids. And we got there, walked in, I seen her little brother. As soon as I walked into the living room, I started talking to him. He was rolling up, so I, wished him happy. And my two homeboys came in, they put some beers into the refrigerator, came back down to the living room.
This call and your telephone number will be monitored and recorded.
But some guy standing by the front door, kind of odd, but I wasn't tripping on him because it wasn't a gang-related party. It wasn't supposed to be, at least. And I guess one of the guys standing by the door started mad-dogging my homeboys. And so one of my homeboys hit him up. Hey, like, what's up, man? What you looking at, Why are you looking all hard like that? Where are you from, And that guy said where he was from. And, it was an enemy. I ain't going to get into exactly who a gang it was, but, he said his, and my homeboy said theirs, and then he pulled out his gun, right, a 9mm. And when I seen that, I was like, oh, even though I hadn't been around to the hood, and I've been out about 5 years, just based on my past, I've just done too much to not strapped, because I never felt comfortable not being strapped. Not even if I lived out there in Riverside, to not feel comfortable ever being armed. So I was armed that day with the 380. So when he pulls out that gun and he was aiming at my homeboy, I was like on his side, and he wasn't really facing me or pointing at me, but when I put my hand into my pocket, he looked at me, but he didn't point the gun at me. So when I pulled out my gun, he was too late. And I capped him down, 3 times. He ended up dying. I took off. I hopped the fences because my brother, the house that we're at before that, where my brother was at, was just right behind her backyard. So I just jammed, got in my car, and I took off, Got rid of the gun the next day and whatnot. Long story short, a few months, about a month, 2 months later, I get caught up at my pops' house, which I thought we were, off the record. I didn't records, but somehow they knew it. And I guess they had been surveillancing that house and my mom's house, which my mom's house was on record. And they got me on my desk, and here I am, almost 20 years later. I tried to fight it as a self-defense because they found his weapon. And I'm fighting my case in the court in Pomona. And at this time, 6 months prior to me fighting my case there, I guess one of the gangs in Pomona killed a cop right front entrance of the Pomona court. So man, it was zero tolerance, man. They went hard on the gangs at that time. When I ended up fighting my case there, and I got, obviously they never offered me a plea bargain. And
This call and your telephone number will be monitored and recorded.
Which was my homegirl that lived there, and my two homeboys. The cops tried to play it off like if we planned it and we set this guy up to be killed in my homegirl's parents' front living room house. Like they tried to say it was all like premeditated, planned out, and that wasn't as far as the farthest thing from the truth. I mean, she wouldn't want to kill somebody in her parents' front yard, or front living room, with their kids in the room, in the next room over. But that's how we played it, and they got me, but they gave deals to my homegirl, the one that lived there, and my homeboy. They both got 5 years for accessory murder. And my other homeboy that was there, he ended up turning on us and turning state evidence and snitched, and was to be given a deal to go home with charges dropped, whatever, time served and to go home. They got him to say a version of the story, right? Which he said pretty much the DA needed him for the DA to get me for first degree murder. Only the certain small part of the story where he tried to say that at trial that I said I'm the one that I hit him up and that we knew he was there, and those are the things that weren't true. But I guess he had to say that in order to get his deal, that in order to testify against me, and he did. He said that, and they found him guilty, and next thing you know, I got 25 to life for the murder, 25 to life for the gun enhancement, and here I am, doing 50 years to life now, almost 20 years later, 19 years later, I'm sitting here now. But that's how the events of my life, in a nutshell, has happened for me. I'm sitting giving you guys this interview. But that's pretty much it.
What is the hardest thing about serving this life sentence?
Oh, man, that's a good question, man. I'm going to be honest with you. When I got caught, I knew at the moment they put handcuffs on me, I knew I was going to get life. I knew it was a wrap because I knew how the justice system was. You know what I mean? And I knew I had no false expectations. I knew I was going to get a life sentence, and that was it. So once they did catch me and I filed my case, I never had no false illusions. Oh, I'm going to beat this or whatnot. So early on, I was able to try to brace myself. So I convinced myself early on it's a wrap. I fought my case for about 2 years in LA County Jail. And not once, I was already convinced it was a wrap.
You have 60 seconds remaining.
I didn't try to have no false expectations. But hold on. Hopefully this Wi-Fi